It was the third week of May, and the Colorado was running higher than it had all year. A woman in her mid-40s drove most of a day to paddle water she had never seen, carrying 6 years of weekend confidence and a kayak built for flat reservoirs. The guide who tried to talk her out of it had pulled people from the rapids at the bottom of the canyon more times than he liked to count. He would spend the rest of that season launching from the same ramp she used to put in ahead of him. He already knew how it ended. Her name matters less than her certainty, so start with the certainty. She paddled every weekend. She would have told you that without being asked. And she told the staff at the outfitter within the first minute of walking in. 6 miles on a reservoir near her home, every Saturday, sometimes Sunday too, in a wide sit-on-top kayak engineered to be almost impossible to flip. She had a waterproof camera mounted on the bow and a second one on a chest harness. She had a sponsorship she mentioned twice, a gear brand that had sent her a discount code and a hashtag and called her an ambassador. She had, by her own count, hundreds of miles on the water, and she carried those miles into the office like a credential nobody had asked to see. What she did not have was a single minute in current. This is the part the reservoir hides from people, and it hides it well. Flatwater paddling builds a real skill, but it is the wrong skill for a river, and the gap between the two is invisible until the moment it is not. On a reservoir, the water holds still and the paddler does the moving. In a river, the water moves and the paddler reads it, and those are not the same sport wearing different clothes. They are different sports. Distance teaches your shoulders endurance. It does not teach your eyes to find the seam between a wave and the hole behind it. It does not teach your hands what to do when the surface you trusted folds over on itself and pulls down instead of holding up. It does not teach you that cold can take your fingers in the time it takes to read this sentence. 6 years of Saturdays had made her strong. It had taught her nothing about Whitewater, and the cruelest part was that she did not know there was anything left to learn. The outfitter ran trips out of an office in Moab, and the man working the desk that morning was its lead guide and part owner, a veteran the staff called Hale. He had 19 seasons in Cataract Canyon. He had started as a teenager hauling rafts and rigging gear and had stayed long enough to learn that stretch of the Colorado the way you learn a face, every mood of it across every water level, the places it was generous and the places it was not. He held a Swiftwater rescue certification he renewed every year, and he kept a logbook out of a habit he had never bothered to break. In 19 seasons, he had pulled 9 swimmers out of one set of rapids near the bottom of the canyon, the 3 that boatmen simply call the big drops. He remembered all 9 of them by something, a jacket color, a first name, the way one of them had laughed in the van on the drive out to the put-in. 2 of the 9 he had not reached in time. He carried those 2 differently than the 7. When the woman asked about getting down the canyon, Hale asked her 3 questions. He asked what she paddled. He asked where she paddled it. He asked whether she had ever rolled a boat or swum out of one in moving water. Her answers took him about 40 seconds to process, and at the end of those 40 seconds, he told her she should not go. He was specific about why, because being specific was the only tool he had ever found that worked. And most of the time, it did not work either. The river was running above 30,000 cubic feet per second that week, he told her, more than 4 times its late summer flow, fat with snowmelt and cold the whole way down. The big drops and the worst of them, a rapid called Satan's Gut, changed their entire character at that volume. Later in the year, at low water, the canyon was a hard run that rewarded respect. At this flow, it was a Class 5, and the hole at the heart of Satan's Gut stopped letting go of what fell into it. That was not a place to learn, he told her. It was a place you earned the right to be after you had already learned somewhere safer, on water that would let you make your mistakes and still live to make better ones. She heard a man telling her she was not good enough. He was telling her the water was colder and stronger and more patient than anything her certainty had ever met. The two sentences sounded identical to her and meant nothing alike. He could see in real time the warning failing to land, sliding off her, the way water slides off a hull. He had watched that exact expression settle onto 8 or 9 faces before hers across the same counter, and he knew, with the flat certainty of a man who has stopped being surprised, what it usually came before. She did not argue for long. People who are certain rarely argue. They simply go around. She thanked him with the particular politeness that is its own form of contempt, walked out to the parking lot, and posted a 1-star review from the front seat of her car before she had driven a mile. Gatekeeping. Rude. A guide who would rather lose a customer than share a canyon that belonged to everyone. The review is still there. Hale read it that same afternoon and said nothing about it to anyone, because there was nothing in it he could correct and no version of the truth that would have read as anything but an excuse. What she did next was entirely within the rules, and that was the worst part of all of it. Cataract Canyon sits inside a national park, and to run it on your own, you need a private permit. She had applied for one and her name had come up, and the permit sat in her glove box with her own signature on it. A permit is a reservation. It is not a skills test. The Park Service hands the canyon to whoever's name is drawn on the honest assumption that people will not launch into water they cannot handle, and the river itself does not ask to see anyone's experience before it accepts them. It accepts everyone the same way. Hale could refuse to guide her. He could not reach into a federal database and take back a permit the government had already issued. No one could. She called a friend. The friend paddled about as much as she did, which is to say, on the same reservoir, in the same kind of wide, forgiving boat, with the same hundreds of miles of perfect stillness behind her and not 1 second of current. Between the two of them, they had 2 helmets. Neither of them fitted correctly, riding high and loose on their heads. They had no throw rope at all. A throw bag is a length of floating line stuffed into a small sack that a person on shore or in a safe eddy can hurl to a swimmer in the water. It is the single most important piece of rescue equipment on moving water. It costs about $40, and they did not own one between them. They did not know they were supposed to. You never need one on a lake. They met at the Potash boat ramp below Moab the next morning. The river had not dropped overnight. It was still running above 30,000 cubic feet per second, and it would hold that high for another 9 days. Hale was at the ramp when they arrived. He was rigging his own commercial trip, a group of paying guests who had signed every page, and he watched the 2 women carry their reservoir boats down to a river that was moving faster than either of them had ever sat on. He recognized her at once. He walked over. He tried one more time, and this time there was no trip to sell and nothing in it for him at all except the attempt itself, which made it the purest warning he gave her and the one she discounted fastest. He told her the gauge had not moved. He told her about the big drops again, and this time he gave Satan's gut its name and told her exactly where the only safe line ran and exactly why she would not be able to hold a boat on it. He told her there were no roads down there, that the canyon kept everyone who entered it for days, and that help, if it came at all, came slow. He offered to let her stay near his rafts through the worst of it, so that at least someone with a rope and a reason would be close. That was the most the rules and his conscience together would let him do. She told him she would be fine. She had her friend film the exchange for the channel. On that footage, you can hear her thank him in the same bright tone, and you can hear Hale say, low and even, the last useful thing he told her, which was that if she came out of the boat, she needed to keep her feet up and pointed downstream and her head up out of the water. Then she pushed off into water running above 30,000 cubic feet per second and sitting at 48 degrees, and the canyon swallowed the morning behind her, and the long count down to the big drops began. The Colorado did not care what her cameras were recording. It did not care about the sponsorship or the ambassador title or the hundreds of flat miles. A river in flood is not angry, which is the thing people get most wrong about it. It is indifferent, which is so much worse, because anger can be argued with and indifference cannot even be reached. From the Potash Ramp, it is the better part of 50 miles of flat water to the place where the canyon finally tilts and the rapids begin, and that distance is the cruelest trick the canyon plays. It is exactly the water she knew. Mile after mile of it, flat and green and obedient, the kind of paddling 6 years of Saturdays had taught her cold. For a day and a half, the canyon told her she had been right and the guide had been wrong, and she believed it because the water gave her no reason not to. Then the walls leaned in and the current quickened, and the first real rapids came. For a while, it almost held together. The opening drops were big but open, long trains of standing waves with real room between them, and the speed of it felt like proof of everything she had told the man at the desk. She was grinning on the footage. She whooped once. She believed the canyon was easy, and she believed it right up until the moment the canyon stopped being easy. The canyon was only clearing its throat. The big drops announced themselves the way all the dangerous ones do with a horizon line. The river ahead simply ended, the surface dropping cleanly out of view, and a low, steady roar rose up from somewhere past the edge. To a trained paddler, a horizon line is a single unmistakable instruction, and the instruction is stop, get to shore, and look before you commit. She read it as more of the same fun she had been having for a mile, and she drove toward it at full current speed with both cameras running. The line through Satan's gut at that water level threaded hard to one side, down a narrow tongue of smooth green water that slipped past the shoulder of the hole. Hale had told her this across the counter and again at the ramp. She had no possible way to use the information, because finding that tongue and holding a boat on it requires reading fast water in real time. And reading fast water in real time was the one and only thing that 6 years of reservoir miles had never once asked of her. She went center. She drove straight into the hole. What happened then happened in seconds, and the seconds did not wait for her to catch up to them. The wide, forgiving boat that could not be flipped on a lake flipped instantly in the hydraulic, rolled like it weighed nothing. She came out of it, a wet exit, the exact situation Hale's last sentence had been built to prepare her for, and in the first shock of the cold, every word of that sentence left her at once. The water was 48 degrees. 48-degree water does something specific and immediate to a human body, and it does it regardless of how many weekends that body has paddled. The first thing it triggers is the cold shock gasp reflex, a hard involuntary inhalation at the instant of immersion. And if your face is underwater when it fires, you breathe in river instead of air. The second thing it does across the next few minutes is take your hands. Cold strips fine motor control fast, faster than people believe, and a swimmer whose fingers will no longer close cannot grip a rope, a rock, a paddle, or the bow of a rescue boat. The window for any useful self-rescue in water that cold runs out in roughly 10 minutes, often less, and for her it had started the moment the hole turned her over. There is a grim order to it that swiftwater rescuers know by heart. The first minute belongs to the gasp and the panic. The next few belong to the hands and the arms going slow and clumsy and finally useless. After that, the cold reaches the core and judgment goes with it, and a swimmer who could have helped themselves at minute 2 cannot even understand the question by minute 8. None of that is a failure of effort, it is chemistry. And chemistry does not negotiate with how badly a person wants to live. The hole held her exactly the way Hale had said it would, because Satan's gut had done this before and would do it again. The same recirculating current that flips a boat will hold a body, drawing it down and pushing it back up into the falling water in a slow closed loop that does not care whether the thing inside it is breathing. 9 times in 19 seasons that Hale knew of, the canyon had collected what it always collected, and it set about collecting again with no more urgency than it had ever shown. The friend was upstream and still in her own boat, and she did not have a throw bag to throw. She had nothing to reach with and not enough skill to get herself near the hole without going into it too. And to her lasting credit, she did not, because 2 reservoir paddlers in Satan's gut would only ever have meant 2. So she screamed instead, and the sound of it carried up the canyon. Hale's rafts were a few minutes back. A few minutes is a number that means almost nothing until you set it against 10, and then it means everything there is. He came down on the big drops and read the whole story in one glance. The overturned boat circling in the hydraulic, the friend pointing and shouting, and he began to move before any part of it had become a decision, because 19 seasons had built the response into him below the level of thought. He eddied his guests into safe water. He pulled his own throw bag. He worked out over the wet rock to the edge of the hole, and he threw the rope to the place where a hand should have been able to close around it. By the time the rope arrived, the hand could no longer close. The cold had already finished the quiet work that cold does. They recovered her below the big drops, Hale and 2 of his guests together at the spot where the river finally tired of her and let her go. He started compression on a gravel bar with snow melt running off both of them into the stones, and he kept at it long past the point where the part of him that had 19 seasons knowing already knew. There were no roads. The nearest help was a helicopter. The canyon walls made hard to bring in, and it was a long time coming. Stopping was a decision, and he could not make that one. She did not come back. The water was 48 degrees, and the gap between the moment she should have stopped at the horizon line and the moment the river stopped her instead was about 4 seconds wide. The footage came off the chest camera intact, which is why so much of this can be told second by second rather than guessed at. The park rangers took their statements, and the account that came together afterward described, in careful past tense, exactly what Hale had told her in plain present tense across the office counter the day before. A river at high water. Cold that gave a body minutes, not hours. A Class 5 rapid at that volume with a hole that held. A paddler with deep reservoir experience and no current experience at all, in the wrong boat, with a loose helmet and no rescue gear, holding a permit that asked nothing of her skill, who had been clearly and specifically warned by a professional guide and had launched anyway from a public ramp that no rule on the books gave anyone the power to close to her. There is a line people cross without ever seeing it, and it is not the horizon line at the top of the rapid. That line is loud, and by the time you reach it, the crossing is already over. The line that mattered was earlier and quieter, and it ran between paddling and Whitewater, between the miles a person has already done and the water they have never once read. The reservoir had told her she was a paddler for 6 years, and the reservoir was not lying to her. It simply could not speak for the canyon. Hale spoke for the canyon in plain numbers for free across a counter and again at a boat ramp, and she could not hear a word of it over the sound of her own certainty. The Colorado charged her the rest of the bill. Hale still launches from Potash. He still keeps the logbook out of the same old habit. The number written in it is 10 now. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more, click on your screen.